Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the GeekWave. This is the low-budget show. It's the show so low it has no budget. Well, it's that time of the year, folks. It's like the best time. Is it? You know, Super Bowl. Super Bowl just happened. Big Super Bowl.
You guys like the Super Bowl? I'm sure there's a direct correlation between the Super Bowl and the audience that listens to this show, where it's like, hell yeah. I watched it for Rihanna. I thought she did an incredible performance where she's like, I don't have to be showy or flashy or like bring out all these guest stars or anything. I just walk on stage or be lowered from a platform, I guess, as it went in the actual thing. Show up, sing my songs. You all fall in love with me. You see that I'm pregnant, and then I go back to make my album, air quotes. Beautiful performance by Rihanna. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We do have like a piece of news, a bunch of news pieces actually. And today's topic kind of stems from me watching a movie that I feel like is going to be very influential to a lot of like independent filmmakers. And then it just got me kind of thinking about like the state of Hollywood and like where we're headed in like terms of like the trajectory of everything. So I was kind of like, okay, I guess I have to talk about this because I think there is something to talk about in this subgenre of film. And I was like, well, it's the Super Bowl, so we'll get a bunch of trailers and shit to talk about, but I also don't want to talk about those trailers because I don't fucking care. None of it matters to me. Doesn't interest me in the slightest, right? So we're going to talk about one trailer and not even about the trailer, really. We're going to talk about like stuff around the trailer, and it's like, okay, you know, Hollywood's in disarray all the time. That's where we are, folks. This is a constant whatever. But before we get into today's topic, there's a little bit of news we have to talk about. Starting with this thing that I think it makes a lot of sense. We've been talking about for a couple of weeks now. Amazon has been pushing their comics agenda where it's like we just maybe made a deal with Pseudoconic for Bitch Planet and we made a deal for Sex Criminals with Fraction. Maybe we made a huge deal with Brubaker and Phillips to do the Criminal series. Well, in that same vein, they made a deal with Scott Snyder, a long time ago where he's going to develop a bunch of Comixology originals. We might develop those into a movie. Like Night of the Ghoul has been kind of talked about, which is a really fun book if you haven't seen it. And I have to imagine, I think he has like a young adult book called like The Adventures of like Kid Dangerous and like the Danger Escape or something. I'm sure that's going to be talked about in the same way this one is because his Wytches comic book is going to be developed at Amazon in an animated styling, which is pretty cool. Like, he's been working on getting this adapted for a long time. I'm sure the very moment he signed that deal with Comixology, they were talking about doing this already. So this makes a lot of sense, and I'm kind of like impressed it took this long to get there. The animated idea is kind of interesting to me because it just reminds you that like Amazon is kind of the only like company really pushing animation right now. They just signed like that huge deal with Critical Role to do like the Mighty Nine and more Vox Machina. That's kind of exciting. They have Invincible being a big deal. Now Wytches is kind of like going to play right in that wheelhouse, like a mixture of both of those based on a comic book, kind of more fantastical horror adjacent. And like that's kind of exciting, you know, that's kind of fun. I haven't read all of the Wytches. It was a book that I'm like, I feel like I should read more of this, but I just didn't. So I probably will closer to the release date of this show. But that's cool. You'd have to imagine that Snyder's going to be making a lot more of his properties into Amazon stuff now. Like that makes a lot of sense to me. Like I did mention, Night of the Ghoul's been talked about. I'd have to imagine Clear. They'll do Clear, which is like his, is that the Menopause book? Like where that he teamed up with like the weird futuristic tech thing. If their Blade Runner show goes through and is successful, I'd have to imagine they would do this. I like Barnstormers. That's my favorite one of his like originals. I don't know if that's going to be one that they push for because it's kind of like a slowly old school romantic weird adjacent steampunk world. But I still love that world. I still really like that world, you know? Could be fun. Just saying. Scotty boy, come on. Let's have some fun. But that's not all that Amazon's doing. They signed a deal, I guess, with like Miller and Lord to make a bunch of Spider-Man stuff. And we know about Silk Society. The next one Silk Spider Society is what it's called, right? Yeah, it's a stupid title. But apparently the next one in the works is Spider-Man Noir. This is a live-action Spider-Man Noir series set in the 30s, which will follow a Spider-Man that is not Peter Parker. Now, here's the thing. Here's the thing I want to make clear, because this is what I 100% believe, and I stand by this statement. This gets me more excited than if it was a Peter Parker, because you don't have to be beholden to the Spider-Man world at that point. I love this old school stuff. Like, this week, I'm actually going to go see that new Liam Neeson, like, Philip Marlowe movie, because I'm like, awesome. We're like less than a month away from the premiere of like season 2 of Perry Mason, which is such a good show. If this is what it takes to get more of those types of things made, where we have to put a Spider-Man logo on it to make like a 1930s gumshoe noir story about a detective solving supernatural crimes in the Marvel adjacent universe, I'm for it. If you have to tell me it's not Peter Parker, it's just some other guy named Spider-Man, okay, here's the dream, and I'm the only person that's going to say this is the dream. My dream is that they just call him like the Spider-Man because he's got sticky fingers and he can like figure out anything, but it has nothing to do with Peter Parker or Aunt May or Uncle Ben or Norman Osborn. It's just in the 30s universe where we're following this guy called the Spider-Man, and he's doing crime stuff in the 30s. That's the dream. We'll never get that. They're going to throw in, like, he's fighting like the Vulture and Tombstone and Hammerhead, you see? And it's like, okay. But look, if this is what it takes to get more of these, if this is what it takes, I'm okay with that. I will be the first in line. Because I love this, and I know it's a TV show, but I'll be the first in line for any of this. More of this genre that doesn't cost a lot of money, can look aesthetically pleasing, and make for some great stuff. I'm for it. Do not give me a web-slinging son of a bitch going around slinging all over the city. Give me a guy with a gun, with the stupid big goggles. That's my favorite Spider-Man anyways. It's great. So I'm on board for this. I think it's going to be a really cool thing we see happen. That being said, I wouldn't be surprised if this was canceled, because what's actually being made and what deserves to be made are like 3 different things altogether. But I love this news. It makes me so happy. I cannot wait for this. And jumping from there, let's go to something that really angers me, because it's 100 years of Disney, folks. And we'll do a big, I think sometime in the middle of the year or wherever, I have a big summer thing planned. I think somewhere we'll talk about like 100 years of Disney, and maybe I'll have like a guest come on and we'll talk about like our favorite Disney stuff. And we'll talk about just like, you know, like Disney through the years and like their biggest moments. Maybe that will be what we do. I'll think about it and I'll decide on that. But to celebrate 100 years, they're like, hey, we're going to be making a bunch of sequels, including Toy Story 5, because why the fuck not? Why, though? Like, why? Who wants to see Toy Story 5? I'm sorry. Please? Who wants to do that? I don't know. Zootopia 2. And I'm like, yeah, okay. I mean, it's a good movie, but is there more to tell in that world? You kind of did like the police are corrupt thing, right? And like racism. Do we need to do like a post George Floyd Zootopia? Do we? I don't think we do. And Frozen 3, which, okay. I remember really liking the first Frozen movie. I thought this was a really fun idea that was presented. And then when the second one came out, I had a really bad theater experience watching it, where like this couple clearly couldn't get their kid to sit still, like in the row in front of me, and then they just kind of left the kid and went to go deal with something on like their cell phone outside of the theater. I'm like, what did you just leave your kid here? Your kid's like 2. It was so weird and just pissed me off. But the movie is also bad. Frozen 2 is a bad movie because it's like, why are we making a sequel to this? Because it was $1 billion. So bankruptcy is a big deal, I guess, in this shit. And I guess the thing is like, because we're not doing Frozen like live action, I guess we have to make sequels to it. I was gonna be like, why don't they just make like another animated sequel to like Snow White or all that stuff? I'm like, oh wait, they're doing live action. We're getting a live action Snow White this year. Remember? Yeah, you know, Disney's so weird. It's such a messed up thing. I don't know. I don't really care for any of that, but it exists. That's pretty much just like all I had to talk about, but then like 2 things happened recently I have to bring up. So the other night, as one is to do, I was watching Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, one of my favorite girls, one of my favorite gals of all time, and I was just scrolling through Twitter while I'm watching it. I saw a little tweet come up in like the For You feed that says, hey, what is Warren Beatty doing? And I'm like, oh shit, did he die? No, Warren Beatty didn't die. It turns out about an hour from when I saw the tweet, Warren Beatty was going to be dropping his new special of Dick Tracy. And I was like, oh, I gotta cancel my plans. And I did. I actually canceled plans to watch this because this is my type of thing. Warren Beatty at 85 years old, pretty much just like presenting to the world that he's such an asshole and a stubborn idiot who's like, nobody else is making Dick Tracy but me. So here's what happened, folks. If you don't know, back in the day, there was like a Dick Tracy movie wanted to be made. I can't remember the name of was it like Tribute or Tribune or something like that owned the rights to Dick Tracy. And they wanted to make a movie, but they couldn't find financing for it. So Warren Beatty himself bought the rights to Dick Tracy, made the movie in like 1990, like post Batman, right around that time where it's like the Rocketeer and the Phantom and the Shadow and all that kind of stuff. So he made that with Madonna and Al Pacino, and it was weird. I like that movie, but it was weird. And then he held on to the rights forever. So it's kind of that, you've heard this before on a different sort of scale where if he doesn't produce like a movie in a certain amount of time, or like the actual like Tribune wants to do something with the rights, they're like, hey, we have an idea for a movie. So if you don't produce something within like this time span we're giving you to produce it, the rights revert back to us. Well, we all know Warren Beatty's a piece of shit who likes to being stubborn, who likes to just present himself as like the coolest guy in a room. So in like 2008, he made a TCM special where he played Dick Tracy going into an interview with Leonard Maltin. And you're like, okay, why did you do that? Like, what are you doing that you as an old man have to hold on to these rights and ruin this character for an entire generation? Weird, right? That's so strange. But then guess what? I guess someone was sniffing around and it was like, we kind of want to do something again. So he's like, actually, hang on. I may be 85 years old, but I'm not letting you take the Dick Tracy rights from me. So over the week, I think it was Friday night, this special presented on TCM called Dick Tracy Special, Tracy Zooms In. And I have to describe this to you. I'll put a picture I took of the event up on screen for you to see if you're watching this on YouTube. What happened was, it's Ben Makowitz and Leonard Maltin. Ben like calls Maltin. He's like, hey, Dick Tracy wants me to talk to him through Zoom. Maltin shows up and they talk to Dick Tracy. And Dick Tracy is the 85-year-old Warren Beatty playing Dick Tracy. But I know what you're thinking. Is he playing the character that he played in the movie that Beatty made 33 years ago? No, this is the real-life Dick Tracy that is upset that Warren Beatty, the actor, portrayed Dick Tracy in a movie about Dick Tracy 33 years ago. So what happens then is both Warren Beatty describing the state of cinema, where he's like, everyone just wants to be on their phones and go to the bathroom. And then he shows clips from the Warren Beatty movie. Remember, this is Warren Beatty as Dick Tracy, not Warren Beatty talking as... It's so weird. So he does that. He's like, why do we make it like this? I thought it was good, but it's not. And then Warren Beatty as himself shows up to the Zoom call and talks to Dick Tracy, which is Warren Beatty playing Dick Tracy, but that's actually Dick Tracy. And they had like a falling out years ago about some bullshit. And if you have no idea what's going on, you're going to lose your mind. For somebody like me who has been innovated on like the happenings of Dick Tracy, has followed a lot of the Dick Tracy stuff, this is fascinating to me. But I'm just like, oh my God, what are we actually doing here? What are we saying about any of this? It was the weirdest thing I've seen in a long time. And then there's just like, Dick Tracy's upset that Warren Beatty made the movie colorful and didn't do like a gritty movie. And then they're like, what if we did a new one? And it's like, you're not going to though. What are you trying to prove by doing this, Warren Beatty? What are you, 85-year-old Warren Beatty, proving by not letting go of the rights? I seriously want to know who you're proving wrong right now, because nobody under the age of 30 gives a shit about Dick Tracy. Like, what are you doing? Who is this for? Is it for your own ego? Are you going to take it to the grave? Why? Who cares? And I love that through the entirety of the thing, Mankiewicz and Maltin look like they have no idea what they signed on for. Even because I watched a little bit of like the TCM clips before the special premiered, and just hearing Mankiewicz describe like filming that scene sounds like he hated every second of it. And I'm just like, what are we doing that we have to make another Dick Tracy special? It's so bizarre. If you haven't seen it, there are clips going around the internet right now. It's not going to fade into obscurity like the last one did in 2008. I'm keeping a recorded copy on my PVR because I'm not losing that. Are you kidding me? That is a piece of iconography that I want to show my grandkids, where I'm like, here's a case of a man so in his own asshole that he talks to himself in character about making another movie that they're never going to make. Insanity. But that's where we are. That is the current state of Hollywood, I guess. You have to be an 85-year-old man maintaining the rights to an irrelevant character, and you have to come pretend you give a shit about like Netflix and stuff and what audiences want today. It is bizarre, and I don't understand what was happening through anybody's mind at the time of that being made. So weird. So weird. But that's not all. I do want to end talking about this like last piece of news because I guess it matters or whatever. The Flash had a trailer, and look. I've seen a lot of people online, and I've seen other interviewers talking about this kind of shit, and it's like, it looks good, it looks fun. Did we see the same trailer? Because that looked atrocious. The helmet on Barry Allen looks so bulbous, and it looks like such like a hodgepodge of ideas from like the Flashpoint universe, which again, why are we doing the Flashpoint for our first Flash movie? Even the TV show took like 5 years to get to it. Like, what are we doing? Aside from the Ezra Miller stuff, he's such a bad choice for the Flash. And then they emphasize Michael Keaton so much, and the suit looks so rubbery and stupid. The CG looked terrible. I hate this trailer so much. What did it do? What did it accomplish? And I kind of put this out into the world. I'm like, are the higher ups at DC and Warner Brothers like dick riding this movie for the fact they have to make money off of it? Or is it because they all love Michael Keaton so much and they're like, man, look how cool it is. It's such like a comic booky thing to do. You know, the Flash, because we all read the Flashpoint. Like, the Flash ruins the Snyderverse universe, and then Man of Steel doesn't happen because there's no Superman on Earth, and then Zod could take over, man. And then that just leads way for Bruce Wayne, man, as Michael Keaton, man. And I'm like, I don't got the patience for this shit anymore. I don't have the patience for this anymore. I love comic books so much. I really do. I love the characters and the worlds. And I think when you spend this much time making these movies the biggest deal in the world, it kind of loses like that quality that makes a comic book industry where it's like, it's the outsider thing, where it's just made for people who like being on the outside of the field, you know? But now when it's just for everybody, it loses its momentum. So I've said it before, I'll say it again. I will not be reviewing Quantumania on this channel. I will be reviewing Marlowe. I will be reviewing Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, two movies I am far more fascinated by than the 100th Marvel movie and the ugliest looking Ant-Man movie there is. I will not be reviewing Shazam! Fury of the Gods. I will not be reviewing Guardians 3 or the Marvels. I'm not even going to watch the Flash movie. I'm not even going... the ones I might talk about, Blue Beetle, because that's not going to be connected to anything, and the Batman 2 when that comes out, and maybe that Superman movie because Superman's in a league of his own. Those are the only things I want to talk about. I just don't care anymore. And this Flash trailer where it's like, I'm Batman. There's a Supergirl here. Look at Ben Affleck. It does nothing for me. You know what did something for me? 2 Ben Affleck properties. One where he was in a Dunkin' Donuts commercial and J-Lo showed up like, is this where you go when you say you're going to work? And 2, when he's Phil Knight in the Weird Air Jordan movie, where Ben Affleck directed a movie about Nike getting Michael Jordan on their side. And I'm like, why? But he looks like he's having so much more fun in that than any of this. So, I don't know what's going on. The world is a messed up place. This Flash movie will exist, and then we'll never talk about it again. But honestly, folks, I'm not going to talk about it now. This will be, I'm going to say this will be the last time I publicly, in like this format, talk about the Flash movie. Enjoy your time watching it. And when we come back from the break, let's talk about Hollywood a little bit more. So, folks, you might be asking yourself, what do you mean there's a craze going on in horror right now? That doesn't sound right. That's not a genre that latches on to the most popular thing that happens and then ruins it for everybody because it's like this snake eating its own tail until it's nothing left and then we have to try again. That's never been the case for the horror genre or Hollywood. Hollywood has never been that disgusting. Well, it is. That is the case with everything, man. I don't know. I wanted to talk about this because there's a couple of things happening right now, especially in the front of horror. And I might even say there's a movie I'm kind of thinking that I could add into this genre, but I don't know if it would connect perfectly to it. There is this kind of phase going into horror right now that I think perfectly represents like where we're headed in terms of independent filmmaking, if that makes sense. There's always like going to be that need where like you're going to want to make like an independent film, but I don't even think it's going to be like solely from independent filmmakers. The new thing is going to be making movies that look cheap. Does that make sense? I'm talking about the Skinamarink identity or the Skinamarink craze. That's the thumbnail for this video. We'll talk about Skinamarink in a minute because there's something I want to explore in that movie. And I think that movie is going to be like the perfect indicator for like how movies can be viewed successfully. But that was a successful enough launch. Shudder bought it right away. I'll get into my thoughts more on that in a minute here because I have a surprising amount to say about that film. So it's like, okay, that was like $15,000 shot in the director's childhood home. That was stylized to look a certain aesthetic, that used certain, songs and cartoons from just like, copyrightless cartoons, right? And that in itself was interesting to see. We'll get into it in a minute. On top of that, being successful, you're like, okay, does that mean we're going to go back to like the paranormal activity phase of things? I thought for a second we were, but that's not what I think is going to happen. So I think this could kind of play into like the same movie theme as like Missing. Missing is like that new movie that came out where it's like some girl's trying to find like her mom through like the internet. And that I think kind of fits into the same umbrella of like an actor acting into a camera and not doing much else, and then like we just have things happen around it. I don't think it like perfectly fits into like the craze I'm building up, but I'm going to say it's like an adjacent property of it. So Skinamarink, the first one to do it. An interesting movie, does fine. And then I think the next big announcement that made me go, oh, we're going to like that surveillance camera, grainy footage, distorted audio vibe. The next thing that kind of like was hugely announced around the time Skinamarink was coming out was the Five Nights at Freddy movie. And I'm like, yeah, Five Nights at Freddy's, that fits into that. That game is very stoic. You're kind of like looking at monitors and being uncomfortable. And that kind of fits into like the frozen camera, looking through grainy footage, staring off into nothingness. What's scary is what you're not seeing or how the shadow or silhouette of something moving does affect you and scare you. Like that is what is happening in Five Nights at Freddy's, right? That, of course, is a little bit more extreme because, of course, Five Nights at Freddy's has like animatronics that chase you and try to kill you and stuff, and there's like a huge lore explored behind it. But it also goes to this other thing of kind of like internet culture now being like a prominent force in movie. Like Skinamarink, of course, the idea for that film kind of comes from like the director doing this YouTube story where he's like reading like this like creepypasta story online, and then it kind of like works like there's an actual story you could tell here. He tells the story, right? Five Nights at Freddy's, not perfectly in that vein of being like based on the internet, but its existence has permeated into a huge spot of the internet, where Five Nights at Freddy's has entire subreddits dedicated to it, entire YouTubers and like theorists that analyze every little detail. It kind of bleeds to that same thing too, where the internet persona of that narrative has finally branched off and become like this huge deal. Where now it's not only like, oh, we're basing this off the game, we're going to play into like the themes and the secrets and the theories and the Easter eggs that fans have been speculating on for a long time for Five Nights at Freddy's, which is kind of interesting. I mean, I never played a game in my life. I have seen people play the games. I never found them to be scary, but if you're going to tell me that Blumhouse wants to turn that into a franchise, I perfectly understand that. A great idea. You get Matthew Lillard as the lead human in it. Perfect idea. A beautiful idea. Very fun. He signed up for a 3-picture deal already? Oh, you guys actually know there's something going on behind the scenes that's going to make this successful. It's the exact same thing as doing a Super Mario movie. The audience is baked in right there. But again, this Five Nights at Freddy's movie has the potential to like bridge the gap to this thing I'm talking about as the new horror craze, where you're looking at this world, right? And it's like, okay, grainy footage, that can be scary. We're like clicking buttons, and that in itself is kind of scary too. And it's like, there's something there that's kind of like interesting and creepy. So I think that's going to be a big thing we see happening very soon, that kind of like new identity. I don't know. Something about that I think is going to work really well. And then this other thing I do want to talk about, which I we'll get back to the how I think like Five Nights at Freddy's kind of like relates to that in a minute here. But this other thing I do want to talk about is kind of important that we are seeing take place. Oh man. So the two movies I'm going to talk about today, or the two things I want to talk about today, Skinamarink and this new movie Backrooms I want to talk about. Here's what I want to say. They're both two inspirations where it's like, oh man, it must be so easy to get into the film industry and make something special, right? How hard could it be? Like look at these two small productions making this thing and making this identity. That's so cool. We're so happy to see it. But then it's also like, oh my God, why am I even trying to do anything? If it's that easy for anything to happen, why am I even trying anything? You know, it sucks. So here's what I want to talk about. Skinamarink does well. It's a global success loosely in the horror community. The director is being praised. The huge opening with like David Lynch sending him like a box of goodies and all that stuff. Now, we'll talk about Kyle in a minute here because I do want to talk about him. That's awesome. Like, I'm so happy like a small independent film financed that slowly, that small, can find its audience, do great on Shudder, captivate an entire generation of filmmakers. That's what I love to see. If you're an independent filmmaker, Skinamarink is about to change the game for you because it just makes it so easy to make something that looks so bad become an instant sensation. After that is kind of like dropped, this huge story breaks, and I had to talk about it because it utterly, utterly fascinates me. And it's one of those things where I'm like, it's that easy, but it's also not that easy. So there is this filmmaker on YouTube, Kane Pixels, or Kane Parsons is his actual name, who is like a VFX artist who makes like these short films on his YouTube channel. And they're very interesting. So I'm kind of watching one right now as we talk about this. It's just like, again, it's called The Backrooms. It's like found footagey, walking in like liminal spaces, peering around corners, looking through like windows and hallways of bad lighting. Very much the aesthetic of Skinamarink, where it's like grainy footage. We're hearing like, you know, the dimming, the humming of like the lights in the room. It's like liminal messages, just quiet stuff. Well, this man, Kane Parsons, has signed a deal, I believe it was with like Blumhouse and A24, to turn the Backrooms short film franchise into a movie. And I'm like, that's cool. Here's where I went, oh my God, what the fuck am I doing with my life? This sucks. I hate Hollywood. I'll never make it. This is... Okay, it's at A24, Atomic Monster, and 21 Laps. Okay, cool. Okay, so this kid, Kane Parsons, 17 years old, will be directing the movie on his summer break from high school. This kid is going to be making a full feature film over his summer break with the resources of A24 and James Wan. Now, I will never, never, never be mad that this kid got this opportunity. But it just kind of, like, if you are somebody who has spent, like, a long time in the industry trying to make a name for yourself, and all you had to do was, like, dedicate your entire childhood to making short 1-minute videos on YouTube, that must hurt. It is that YouTube thing where they always go where the money is, the success makes it special. I'm not discrediting. I do not want this to sound like I am discrediting Kane's ability to tell stories. I've seen some of those clips on his YouTube channel. They are utterly baffling and beautiful, and I could not make something like that. I just think it's like, oh my God, this 17-year-old is going to direct the movie. Is it going to be all like the Adobe stuff he uses, or is it going to be like actual like live action elements? I don't know. I just think this kind of like bleeds into this conversation I was having of where horror is going right now. So we have Skinamarink, successful. Five Nights at Freddy's, same kind of vibe, gonna be huge. Now we have this other thing based off of an internet personality and persona that is about to break through and become another big thing. And that's kind of like where I think the horror trend is going right now. I think between the semi-success of Skinamarink, the huge success that will be Five Nights at Freddy's, and whatever the Backrooms movie is going to look like, we're going to see a huge uptick in like independent filmmakers on small budgets taking their old like video cameras from like the 90s and 2000s, running down their back alleys or in like these abandoned houses in like their neighborhood, sticking things up on like a ceiling or a wall and making small independent movies. And that is so cool. I think that's awesome that that's going to happen because now there is a proven market for this. And that's really cool. It's like back in like the 90s when there was like, you know, the independent boom and all that stuff and everybody was making like their Clerks and whatever. And then when we had like the Blair Witch, I feel like we're headed back to that point where we're going to be doing more Blair Witch adjacent stuff. I love the Blair Witch. It's a really fun movie. And if we could do more stuff like that, I think it's cool. The other thing I think that's really prominent about what's being said here is a lot of this stuff is coming from an online resource, you know, where it's like there are complete Instagram pages dedicated to look at like this dark alley and here's like a weird telephone creature walking down, or like here's this like abandoned hotel hallway and look at this like weird thing walking through the rooms and all that stuff. You guys know the videos I'm talking about, right? Like where I follow some of those stuff on Instagram and I look at some things, but you watch like, because I'm on the Backrooms kind of like YouTube right now, and I'm just kind of like clicking through some of the videos. And as I look at them, I'm just like, there is genuinely something here that is very interesting and very compelling. And I think this is going to be what we're seeing like the huge stand from Hollywood become now, is watching this kind of thing take shape, take form. And it's exciting. It's also kind of like, oh man, is this really what we're doing? We're reverting back to like the low budget horror? I don't know. It's so weird that way, but it's kind of cool, isn't it? I think it's kind of interesting. There's some really fun stuff that can be explored in there, but that's the next horror craze. Skinamarink, the Backrooms, Five Nights at Freddy's, these small budgeted things where we can have stiff cameras with grainy dialogue and audio and just look at like this cheaper aesthetic for everything and just a weird creature that we don't really like animorph or anything. You just kind of see it in the background blending into these things. It's all about the atmosphere and tension. looking like it was recorded in 1994. You know, like that's the vibe. That is the vibe of what this is entirely looking like and entirely feeling like. And that's kind of exciting. There's going to be a huge boom for that. It's going to be giving a new light to horror, which is kind of exciting to see. It's going to be giving new life to independent filmmakers, which is really exciting to see. It's essentially going to take us to this new era that the industry kind of needs, which is a simplistic idea. Again, I love big budget horror, but you have to imagine after the 6th Scream movie comes out, we just finished the latest Halloween movie, and we're like, they're all kind of like pedantic and feeling like the same and not going anywhere creative or changing our minds on anything. You have to imagine after that, there's like a breath of fresh air where we're like, oh, let's just go watch this like 17-year-old play on Adobe for like a year, design this trippy, stupid thing where we're walking through like an empty office building and then like a shadow moves by. And like, that's kind of refreshing. And then you could be like, oh, there's an entire like subculture of this identity on the internet. You can find Reddit threads about these types of creepypastas. And I don't want to specify like the creepypasta thing. I think we'll come back and talk about that on another video. I just think this is so utterly fascinating. So utterly fascinating. Where it's like, okay, we can do it again. You don't need $1 million to be dumped into this thing. Just get your camera, film something ugly, and you have a hit. Now, I'm not saying it's going to make Endgame or Way of Water money, but it's going to be a Shudder adopted idea. You're going to be given the opportunity to make more things like it. I think that is a really cool thing to see. Really fun thing we're seeing. If that is the future of Hollywood, is actually getting these young creators the opportunity to do this stuff, that's really cool. It gets me excited because now I'm like, okay, a 17-year-old can get a feature film. A guy from my city can have his movie bought by Shudder. What am I doing just sitting here talking about this stuff? I can go get a video camera. I have a couple and go film something in the woods. I have an idea that's like very Skinamarink for the woods. Why not? You know? It's kind of exciting that way. I do like that. And while Skinamarink's not a movie I particularly love, we'll get to in a minute, there is something about this that's very exciting. So this is where I think the current trajectory of the horror universe is going to go. When it comes to like the curios of like Shudder and those smaller scale things, I could see maybe Amazon picking up a couple of these. I could see maybe AMC picking up some. Well, maybe not AMC. I feel like the next couple of years, we're going to see more than just these things being personified in this big way. I think we're going to see more movies inspired by this. We're going to, even if it's on like YouTube, even if it's on TikTok, we're going to see directors aspiring from a younger generation who grew up on the internet, who are like, hey, here's this story about like this like mystery happening in this person's house where they keep seeing like something in the window. I think we're going to see a lot more of that boom, and it's going to take over. And even if it starts low budget, it starts down here. We get a couple $1,000s to make this thing. It booms up, and then we get Shudder to see it, and then we get more studios to see it, and then Blumhouse picks it up, and A24 picks it up. This is the future. I wholeheartedly believe this is the future, and this is where cinema's going. Not on a big scale, but for the current craze that needs to give like the industry the shot in the arm, low-budgeted, grainy footage where everything's ambiguous is the way to do it. I do like that. So as much as I am like, oh my God, the 17-year-old's going to make a feature film, he's talented, and that could literally inspire a new generation of filmmakers. And what do you want more than good movies being made? So let's take a quick break, and when we come back, I'll talk about Skinamarink and why it upsets me because it's nearby. So ladies and gentlemen, it's Skinamarink time, a movie directed by Kyle Edward Ball. Now here's the thing I want to get into before we kind of like get into actually talking about this film. I know the house this was filmed in. Now, I'm not going to say anything else. It's just that it was filmed in the city I live in. It's the childhood home of Kyle. I know the area pretty much where it was filmed. This is like an actual movie made in my city. Now, if you look it up, you'll find out exactly where that city is. I won't tell you here. But to know that a guy in my backyard made something with resources from this city is very interesting. It's very inspiring. Again, that's the thing where I'm like, okay, cool. Kane Parsons is making the movie. This excites me a little bit more because I'm like, Kyle is from my city. He's making a movie that is being praised by critics and horror icons like David Litch, like Patton Oswalt's praising it. Like, that is being like the biggest thing you're seeing right now. And that's really cool. I genuinely think that's awesome. And then the movie starts up and I see like, oh, that's a production company where you can rent equipment in this city. And oh, I know like that part of the industry and I know that side of things here. I know that street and what's being done there. That kind of stuff is very fascinating. It's kind of cool. $15,000. The movie at the time of this has grossed over $2 million. And it is going to inspire filmmakers forever because, again, it is cheap. It's all about aesthetic. It's all about atmosphere. And it is genuinely interesting. Again, I'm not going to spoil it for you. It is on Shudder. And, okay, I'll just say this. Now, it's not my favorite film ever made. I don't necessarily love it. But it's impressive. Nonetheless, having this made on that budget is insane. Like, the visuals are impressive. The static energy of the thing is impressive. It is so gorgeous to look at sometimes. Everything has like a perfect technology. This is not a criticism. I think I could make this film, and I think that's so cool where if you are a young filmmaker and you're watching this because it's like $15,000, you can make this kind of horror film. That is very inspirational, and I think that is going to have a lot of people just smiling and feel good about themselves and be like, this is kind of cool. It makes people happy. A film like this is so interesting to look at. Now, it is kind of long. In my opinion, it is kind of long, and we do dwell on some moments for too long. And if you are not like fully engrossed in like the genre or like exactly how it's looking, it can get annoying, or it can be like, okay, we're spending a long time on this like one moment for too long. But it's genuinely scary. It is genuinely motivating. It's going to make you feel things and understand things. And I do like that a lot. When we can just look at a movie like this and it's like, okay, it's dark, it's grainy. Oh shit, a face just moved by. Oh shit, somebody's sitting at the end of a bed. Oh shit, things are moving weird. That stupid like telephone doll thing. What like, you know, that mobile like telephone with like the face. That is a creepy moment that happens. And as I was expecting it to happen, so I was like, okay, I know that's coming, but it's so unique. And that's a really exciting thing to say. I do like the way it looks. Just seeing this, again, I don't know the specific location of the house, but I know that exact layout pretty well. And the way those blinds look and the way the floors look, and I know that kind of aesthetic. I know exactly what that house is doing and what that house looks like. Crazy stuff. But again, it just goes to show you, if you just get a couple of the resources in your city, because look, I am sure if you are from a big metropolitan, there are going to be smaller companies where you can buy this kind of stuff from, rent this equipment, and you just film it at your house. You turn down the lights. You only use like flashlights in certain colors, and you can get like, you know, old school public domain footage to use. You get a bunch of local actors, and you just film a thing that doesn't have a lot of dialogue, and it's all about the atmosphere and the tension you're building. I'm not saying it's that easy, but sometimes that's all it takes, is just taking a moment like this and trying it. And it works. And you get something wholly original that is going to change the game, that has already had, I'm sure, conversations of how to make Five Nights at Freddy's look like this, how to make the backrooms that aesthetic. Subliminal, grainy, found footage horror is coming back in a big, bad way, and Skinamarink is the start of that. Not my favorite film. I do understand exactly what it's saying. I think it does some things well. And because of the budget, I do know exactly what's being said here, and I understand where it's going for. And when sometimes the edits aren't perfect, sometimes the framing isn't perfect, I'm not going to criticize that. I would do just as well. Maybe not even as well, but the fact that it looks like this, that's like the coolest thing in the world to me. And look, Kyle, man, I'm jealous. You're putting our city on the map, and that's kind of gonna scare me a little bit. Look, The Last of Us is doing it too. I'll just say that. I think we're about to see a huge fluctuation in this city when it comes to film, and that's kind of cool. And this is exciting. Skinamarink, not my favorite movie. I'd probably give it like a 4 out of 10, just because it's like not my tempo, but I can't say it's bad, and I cannot tell you not to watch it. There's so many interesting things going on in there that are worth exploring. And it's going to start a craze of horror movies looking like this. And what else do you want? That's really cool. That's really cool. So we have a man from my city making a movie that is being admired and reviewed. We have a 17-year-old taking his inspiration from his Adobe software, making movies on YouTube that is now going to get a feature film. And we have Five Nights at Freddy's, which is steeped in internet culture. This is the next horror craze. Get out your cameras, turn off the lights, film in night vision, go out to the woods or just in your neighborhood, have your friend run down the street light dressed as an owl, and you have yourself a viral clip that can inspire the next big blockbuster. Maybe that's what I should do. Who knows? I would love to, like, again, you see things like The Backroom and Skinamarink, and you're like, do I want to make a movie like this? I'm a dialogue man. I've always had a problem with like just wanting to have dialogue. But maybe what I need to do is just get my camera and go film something. Maybe that's what I'll try to do. We'll see. We will see. But hey, that is going to do it for this episode of the GeekWave. Now be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. As always, you can check me out on Instagram, TikTok, and Hive. And I will catch you in the next one. Have fun. Stay safe. Good luck.